The art of analyzing replays is bothering to look at things. And what we want to look for is general markers. We want to look for general markers, general structure of how the game played out. And then once we see how it played out, we go back and try to figure out why it played out like that. So one of the really useful things we can always do is skip to 8 minutes. And this is for all matchups, not just CVT. We can pause here and we can say, all right, do we have 50 drones? If you just watch the units tab, seriously, go to a corner of the map. Don't look at anything else. I want all you guys to do this if you can. And you're going to look for idle lava. And the longer idle lava sits up there, the worse it is. Our goal as a Zerg player is always to have macroed well enough early that by the moment the Terran starts pushing away at our creep and being annoying, we have enough units to roll over them and push them back onto their side of the map. You always want to be aiming for like a 6-minute third base at about 44 supply. If you can go third base, then start the 4th queen, that's going to be really nice, because otherwise it can be a little bit hard to get that third base down once Hellions start arriving. Even if you've got a few speedlings out, it can get very frustrating. As soon as that third base is down, we want to start the 4th queen, as I said, but also put back on gas. And because you don't have a third base unlocked yet, all you should be building at this stage is Zerglings. You build about 15 to 20 Zerglings for safety, maybe even 30 Zerglings, just up until your third base is like 2/3 done. And then you can go back to droning, and you can send all those drones straight down to that third base. Don't worry about a wall, it's always going to be about having Zerglings out. So considering you're putting back on gas at 6 minutes and you're dropping a second gas like just a little bit after then or right around then, you should have the gas around 6 minutes 30, which is a really safe timing to get that Baneling Nest. So we're always going to spend our first gas on that, our second gas on 1/1 upgrades, and our third gas on lair. Now, if you're versing a Banshee, you can go lair before upgrades. And that's going to obviously speed that up so you can get your overseers out. Because obviously you can get a Spore Crawler in each mineral line. It'll stop them, doing catastrophic damage with the Banshee. But if your lair's still not finished and they've got 2 cloaked Banshees like sitting between your bases, they can pick off drones that are rallying, they can maybe pick off an Evo chamber, they can just be really annoying. And what you want to be doing is you want to just be using your hotkey. So whenever you get to a creep cycle, you just click on your minimap, say here, you select your hotkey, you go creep, 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 and then you hold down shift and you move them back to your safe point where your queens should chill. We never want to leave our queens out on the edge like this, because if we ever lose those queens, I'm sure you've been in those games where you lose the queens at like 11 minutes to some drop or something, and then you just never remember to rebuild them, or you do rebuild them, but by the time they get out there, your creep spread is like pushed all the way back to your base. The number one way you beat Bio Widowmine is just by having a lot of stuff. And what we saw here is you doing something which I have a lot of experience with, because I do it myself whenever I'm not in a strong mindset in Zerg vs Terran. I get worried about those Widow Mines and I back and forth over and over and over again. And this is what you did, and during that time you were supply blocked on 145 supply for several minutes, and you also did missed quite a lot of injects, even in your natural as well. And it was because you were distracted by his army. So rather than getting distracted, and what I'm going to write here is, when your opponent pressures, you either, 1, go destroy his army, or 2, pull back and keep macroing. From here, all he's doing is macroing. I can tell you, 90% of his attention is in his base. This guy has really good macro. Fast 4th command center, adding his 2nd factory, adding his barracks, non-stop production. His upgrades are on time. And what's he actually doing with his army? All he's doing is clearing up the creep tumors on the edge. He's not doing anything else. But we're very, very distracted by it. You can see it by how your army's moving in reaction, that we're feeling very nervous here. So part of it's going to be just getting your confidence up, man. Just be confident to say, look, I'm always going to have enough units to crush you if you come on creep. If you don't come on creep and you're just picking at the edges, I'm going to ignore you. I'll sit my army back here and I'll just keep injecting, keep building units. And if you hang around long enough, then I'll go fight you off creep. Basically, your queens and zerglings are what actually deal most of the damage, ideally. Because if we spend too much money on banelings, it does slow down our transitions a lot, especially because we're trying to stay on just 1 or 2 gases in the early game and right up until we fully saturate our third base before we add all the extra gas. So if we morph too many banelings, it's going to slow down our economy. So this is a really good question because it's always a bit hard to balance it just right. But against the really fast timing where it's just 6 Hellbats, 8 Marines, a medevac, with that you only really need about 8 banelings at most, I would say. You could make 10 if you want, but you can probably even get away with 5 or 6 because the core thing is once Hellbats are spread out, Zerglings and Queens can do really well against them. It's when they keep stuttering forwards and getting on top of your Queens that your Queens become ineffective. And it's also when they're in a ball so that your Zerglings can't get surface area and they get focused down that your Zerglings become ineffective. So what happens is if you just have enough banelings to blow up the Hellbats if they're clumped, and if they're spread, well, it's enough banelings to force them to spread and to stay spread out and to, to still kill most of them. And I was in the MYI house and I was watching Sax replay over the shoulder and he got surprised by it and he just kind of kept spreading his queens and just kept like splitting them up. So he just kept running each one back in different directions, kind of that boxing micro you were talking about. And I was like, well, no, you just die, like, because it's 8 Hellbats. Like, they're just going to waste so much mining time. They're going to kill all the queens. They're going to kill drones. And he just bought so much time by his queens just constantly, like, backing away in different directions from the Hellbats that the Hellbats have started to spread apart. And as they spread apart, the Zerglings would come in and they'd pick off 2 Hellbats at a time, 2 Hellbats at a time. And he cleaned it up and he didn't lose a drone. He lost, like, 2 queens. And he had no baneling nest. He droned like a madman. So he was just, like, the game was over from that point. I kind of realized, like, wow, if you're really patient and you just keep backing away and don't panic, then you can usually force them to get impatient. And they'll be the ones that say, I need to get damage done. I can't stay in a ball. Let's split up and go for different targets. And that's suddenly when Zerglings, which have been banking up away from the Hellbats, can start being efficient.